We are back. Senators, Twins, baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And, wow, we've got a nice, almost full house. George Case III is with us. How are you, George?
I'm just fine, thank you.
Good. Ronnie Rabinovitz.
Hi, Ralph. How are you, buddy?
See how I do it now? We just make it.
You're doing good.
We're doing all right. Okay.
We sure are.
A returning guest to the network, 2 or 3 times now. Author, maven, raconteur, Renaissance man, Gary Sarnoff.
How you doing,
Gary?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Gary,
How are you,
Gary? You have a famous name, Sarnoff, in the media. Is it the same? Do you have in your family the same Sarnoff that ran NBC for a while?
No relation. I've been asked that many times, but I am unrelated to the David Sarnoff.
Well, actually, they're unrelated to the Gary Sarnoff. Okay.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah, it's a better way. It's a better way.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that about Gary's name. My son, his first job, he worked at RCA, and Sarnoff in Princeton had the research lab. So I didn't even think about Gary's name being the same, but that was right. But now that you say you're not related, Gary, I feel better for not having asked you.
Right. Hey, George, you're no relation to George Case Jr., are you?
I think somebody told me that at one time.
One time or another. Okay. And Ronnie.
Yes.
I want to ask, because you do this on a regular basis for the Twins, I want to ask about your ongoing practice of talking to kids about the legacy of Jackie Robinson and how much that means to Middle America. That what I like about Minnesota is that they're very atypical of Mid America. You're a very progressive state, and I know your dad had a lot to do with that, or of setting the tone originally, and you're passing all that on to the kids is terrific.
Thank you.
Who are you speaking to this coming week or this coming month? And,
I have a couple of... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I have a couple of speaking opportunities again at Target Field. They have a tours group, a group of people that give tours of Target Field. And a lot of classes come in there with their teachers and kids, and they take a tour of the stadium. And one of the offers that they have is they can sign up for my presentation, which is Jackie Robinson and the Kid. And I talk to them about diversity, about bullying, about what Jackie Robinson meant to me and what I learned from him. These kids can be anywhere from first grade to high school. And my presentations may be a little bit different if it's a first grader than I would if it was a junior high schooler or high schooler. They're very receptive to it. When I first started speaking in 1987, so it's been 30 years.
Wow.
I went into a classroom and I said to the kids, all right, kids, how many ever heard of Jackie Robinson? And this little boy stood up and said, no, who is she? And I said, who is she? And then I realized, how would they know? Fortunately today, thanks to the teachers, they all know. I'd say 95% of them have heard of Jackie Robinson. It's part of the curriculum, Black History Month, whatever. I also speak to corporations, companies, and clubs all over the country. I've been in New Jersey at Unilever. I've been in Prudential Financial and others, medical conferences. You'd think, why would a medical conference want to have a speaker like that? Well, what they do, sometimes they have a one-day seminar, and they want a non-related medical topic for their lunch. So I'm the keynote speaker for the lunch. So I've done this for many, many years. Yeah.
And you're having a book written about you by our own Cindee.
Cindee James and I are collaborating on a book, which will be called Jackie Robinson and the Kid. And it should be out next year. I actually have two books coming out next year. I have one of a children's book that it's going to be called Always, Jackie, because that's how he ended his letters to me. Always, Jackie. Now, in a children's book, there's a lot of illustrations, so there isn't a lot of words. Cindy's book and my book is going to be much more. It's going to be words, pictures, and whatever. It's going to be a full book. And I'm very excited about it. She's doing a terrific job. She sent out a synopsis the other day.
Is there anything left to tell that hasn't been told about Jackie? Is there a slant that she's taking that's a different angle?
Yes.
What are you guys going to put out there that hasn't been told so far?
Well, I think, Ralph, what we're going to be doing is, a lot of people know who Jackie was, and he broke the color line in baseball and all of that. But I focus more on what he did after baseball, where he was so active in the civil rights movement. He was so active helping burning churches that were burned to the ground. He was so active in creating a bank in Harlem called the Freedom National Bank because other financial institutions were raising their interest rates for African Americans. He started a construction company to help African Americans and other minorities to build homes.
He was a top-level executive with Chock full of nuts.
Chock full of nuts, right, exactly.
And not just for his name,
for
his acclaim. That wasn't it. It was for his human interactions and how he brought people together in the community.
Right.
And we also are going to, in the mid-'60s, I sold insurance for an agency called Crone and Crone with a K.
Okay.
And they were on, their office was on 125th Street and Lenox Avenue, where those two famous streets meet, basically downtown Harlem. And many times I would see Jackie in this long coat, long winter coat, chatting on the corner with folks. And I just never had the guts to go up to him. He's just like one of those people, like Lon Simmons, famous announcer in San Francisco. I'd see him at Safeway. Every time I try to go up to him, what do you say? The words. And I'm not a shy person, but, this was Jackie Robinson. Ronnie, are you ever asked what would have happened if Jackie would have played with the Giants that one last year?
Yeah, I've been asked that many times. I think that he really wanted to go out a Dodger. That's for sure. He had already made a deal with Chock full of nuts. It was a standing offer that said that any time you decide that you're done with your baseball career, you can come here, whether it's 56, 57, 58, whatever it is. It was an open door offer, which was tremendous. So he thought about it. I think he realized that his skills were waning. His speed was slowing. His health had been deteriorating. and he suffered, from diabetes for many, many years.
Sometimes that affects eyesight. With my
yes.
dad especially, or specifically, did that affect his abilities, deteriorating eyesight?
No, it really didn't. His eyesight was affected years later, where he actually went blind in one eye, and he was going blind in the other eye. I was with him in New York 6 months before he passed away, and he was in really rough shape. Matter of fact, it was almost shocking to me to see him that way, because he was blind in one eye. He had had a heart attack, and with the diabetes taking a toll on his body, he was in rough shape. And I had to take him by the arm and help him into this restaurant. And I felt so sad because I remembered him dancing up and down those bases, driving pitchers crazy. Now, I hadn't seen him for a while, and to see him in that state, it was really rough. We had lunch. He was so happy to see me. He wanted to hear all about my family and me, of course, about his. And later on, I hailed him a cab and got him settled in the cab and leaned in and kissed him on the cheek and told him how much I loved him. And as that cab disappeared into space, I was standing on that corner watching it disappear. I had tears running down my face because I knew that I would never see him again. One of the things that this book is going to talk about is diversity and bullying and some issues that are so important today. That not only relate to Jackie Robinson, but to relate to kids, to adults, to everybody. Today, our nation is in a very difficult situation, and a lot of the book will be focused on that. It will also be focused on the story of my adoption, which I was adopted when I was a month old, and after my father passed away, I did a search, and it's quite an amazing story. It's unbelievable, the whole thing.
A search for your
birth parents,
natural parents.
Birth parents, right?
Oh wow!
And I never really wanted to. I didn't care. I mean, my parents told me I was adopted even before I knew what it meant. And as a kid, I'd go around, "Hey, I'm adopted." Oh, that's so wonderful! I got such a good response. You're very special. Blah blah blah. So I used to tell people I was adopted. And I didn't know what it meant. So when my father passed away, I went to a doctor one day and they said, "Is there any cancer in your family, any heart trouble?" And I thought it was important with genetics today to find out for my children. So I started this search. Now, it's kind of a lengthy story. I'll be happy to share it. But if we have time, otherwise we can share it another time. Whatever you think.
No, we'll share it. But let me break it up a little bit, give you a breath. And
okay.
I want to talk to Gary and George about something that I'm really curious of, and that's S.A.B.R, S-A.B.R. Gary, you start off. What does S.A.B.R mean to you? I know you and George have combined on some writings for S.A.B.R. What is that about for the benefit of some of our audience that may not know?
Well, I think it's a couple of different things. I think it's community as far as being with people with the same interests and the same sort of love for baseball. I think it's a wonderful group to be a part of just because of the love for baseball, for starters. I also think it's opportunity. It's an opportunity to write and to do research and to contribute and obtain information as well. And it's a great opportunity to talk to people who have the same kind of love for baseball as you do. So I think it's a wonderful organization. And it's just so much, so many different parts of baseball. It's just like the history of the game, the history and different factors like the Negro Leagues or the American League, the National League, women in baseball. It's just it's fantastic. It's great. I'm just glad it's there. I love being a part of it. It's fantastic. I love it.
Now, George,
what does S.A.B.R stand for?
Pardon me, Ronnie?
What does S.A.B.R stand for? Is there
Society of American Baseball Research?
Okay, for people that don't know, right? Okay.
Okay. And George, you were an executive director at S.A.B.R for a while. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was, Ralph, and I think that's when I first met Gary. I'd been the executive director of S.A.B.R 2000 to 2002. And, I was drawn to the organization simply because of the interest in baseball and baseball history and the research. And I really enjoyed my tenure with S.A.B.R and met an awful lot of people around the country in various chapters and some former ball players who were members of S.A.B.R and who had, matter of fact, the Orlando, Florida chapter of S.A.B.R is named for Eldon Auker, who my dad played against. Eldon was a pitcher with the St. Louis Browns and Detroit Tigers, and the other person was Andy Semenuk, who was a catcher with the Philadelphia Phillies. So,
yeah,
right. So they were two gentlemen that I was really pleased to meet during my time as executive director. I went down there to a meeting. I had a chance to speak myself and to talk with Eldon and Andy, and it was a lot of fun for me going around the country. S.A.B.R has around 30-some chapters throughout the United States, and as Gary mentioned, it's all about baseball history, research, and people like Gary also do presenting. I think Gary did a presentation not too long ago at one of the Negro League conferences or a S.A.B.R meeting, and a lot of the researchers who have written books and done research on various aspects of baseball are part of S.A.B.R and make some wonderful contributions.
Beautiful. Let me ask you this, George. Was there anything specifically that you learned about your dad from other folks because of your S.A.B.R experience?
Well, I don't know whether I can recall anything specific, although a lot of people did come up to me when I first joined S.A.B.R and told me that they remembered, my dad as a player, and they were happy to have a chance to meet me being his son and to hear some of my stories. So I think I related a few stories to people over the years that they might not have known about my dad. It's easy to find the information in the record books, but
you do that every week with us. So
well, I appreciate that, but that ball players, as Gary will tell you too. I mean, ball players are human beings, and a lot of my stories about my dad were really about him as a father to me, and as a person who enjoyed his family, and what he did on the field obviously was important to him, but what he did off the field was a lot more important, and that's what I think a lot of people, over the years, they start to think about ball players as something, really unique and special, when in reality, a ball player is a human being just like you and I and Gary and Ronnie. I mean, they have the same interests and desires and needs that we all have. And that's what I enjoy, sharing with people about my dad's life.
Nice. Really nice. Gary, did you have a specific interest when you went into S.A.B.R, or did you develop one after you became a member?
Well, actually, it was Eddie Gold, who was a legendary member of S.A.B.R. He's the one that got me to join. I used to talk to Eddie Gold all the time about baseball and baseball trivia and the history of the game, and he's the one that kept telling me, you got to join S.A.B.R, you got to join S.A.B.R. So that's how I became a member of S.A.B.R, was through someone else's recommendation.
Okay. What's the one thing that you picked up on and learned that from S.A.B.R that you're just so grateful for that? If there is just something, a philosophy, just anything.
like most about it is the conferences they have. We have a regional conference every year, every January. We have the national conference every summer, a national conference, and there's also other conferences like the Arizona Fall League Conference and the Jerry Malloy Negro League Baseball Conference. So what I really liked most about it was the different conferences, and I guess what I learned most was there are people out there who love the history of the game as much as I do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the Arizona Fall League. Casual baseball fan doesn't know of the importance that league has developed as a developmental tool, as a way that scouts can see players under kind of a level playing field. And tell us how that got started, Gary, how the league got started, and some of the famous managers. I know Dusty Baker managed there. I think he was the first manager to get a big league job coming out of that league. Tell me about how that got started, Gary.
I'm not really that familiar with the Arizona Fall League, to tell you the truth. I've never been there for the conference or never have seen a game. I know that, it was started for the scouts to see prospects in action. The first time I had heard of it or became familiar with it was when Michael Jordan was sent down to to Arizona to play one fall season. That's when I first became familiar with what it was and what it did. But I'm not really an expert on it.
How did he do competing? That was after his AA season with the White Sox under Francona, Tito's kid, Terry.
Right. Yeah, I remember he was a leadoff batter and he was an outfielder, but Michael Jordan was he was made for he was a basketball player. He found out that baseball is a lot harder than basketball, but he got to live a dream. He got to at least try it, and any one of us would have loved to have done what he did for one season.
Absolutely.
So,
Sure.
Yeah.
I think he talks about how important that was. I think it was the year he was asked was he suspended actually, or was it just an agreement? I don't know. But his dad had passed away. It was very important to him and his mental well-being, the year or so that he spent in baseball. It has that effect. It's a calming sport. There's no rush. You're not controlled by the clock. And I think that's one of the nicest part of it. A game could be 2 hours. It could be 5 hours. And I know that's a major bugaboo today, time with people. And I think they're missing the boat. That's all. I think if you're concerned about time, it isn't baseball that you should be going out to see. I mean, you should.
Well, that's one of the appeals, Ralph and Gary, Ronnie. One of the appeals about baseball, when you're playing, and if you're a real fan, there is no time limit. In other words, you're not governed by a play clock like in basketball or football. I mean, a game can go on for. When my dad was playing 2 hours, and today it goes on for 4 hours, but there is no time limit. And at the end of 9 innings, if there's a tie score, they'll just keep playing until they have a winner. So that's the nice thing as far as I'm concerned about baseball, is that the time limit is not there, and that to me is what makes the game so attractive.
Me too.
I agree with you, George.
My friend. Nice. Let me get back to Ronnie a little bit. Ronnie, you've been doing this 30 years. You've been talking to kids. Can you give me a story of some child who you talked to who affected the mindset of their family who may have, at the beginning, really not had any social conscience whatsoever, and how that changed the relationship between the kid and their family, and how it affected their lives.
Yes, I can, Ralph. I used to, many times I've spoken to an English class, and the teacher would give them an assignment to write a story or a review of my presentation. And then what they've done is they've sent those letters to me. So I'm telling them about letters from Jackie, and I'm receiving letters from them. And many of them have gone on, and in those letters have expressed how important it was for them to understand what he went through and what others are going through, and it's made them more cognizant of the fact that today it's so important to them. It's changed their life. And I've had so many letters to that effect, both from grade school, high school kids, mostly junior high school and up. And then, of course, I've spoken several times at George Washington University, and I've received some beautiful letters that were sent to the professor, who forwarded them on to me about my presentation and what it meant to them. So it's very gratifying to see that they go out of their way to write to me. I saved those letters. I've read every one. There's thousands of them. And it's very important to me that and as they grow older, I've had kids come up to me and say, "Oh, I remember when you talked to me, as a kid, and it meant so much to me." Well, that in itself pays for the whole thing. I mean, it's worth it.
Yeah,
so
I hope you're getting that love back, because
yes,
Ronnie, you spread it out there, and
yeah.
so proud.
I mean, I was at. Thank you. I was at Unilever in New Jersey. Had a tremendous program there. They had a Diversity Day program, and had terrific response from some of the adults that were there, and also at Prudential Financial. They did a grading, like more, as you would say, of my of the speaker and what they learned from it. And I got those results, and they were very gratifying. So that in itself keeps me wanting to do more of it. I want to travel more. I'm looking forward to going to more clubs, to corporations, to companies, and of course schools too, and tell this story. Mm-hmm.
Would Jackie be saddened because there are so few African Americans playing in the big leagues today?
I would say yes. I think he would be.
What do you attribute that most to? Do you just the opening of the game to other countries?
Well, it seems like, I would say that they're not. A lot of kids are playing basketball or football. A lot of kids are doing other things today. When I was growing up, or even as a young adult, I mean, I could go in any neighborhood and see kids playing baseball on every corner. Today you don't see that. They're inside the house on their computers, on their phones. It's a different, I mean, when I was a kid, I was outside the whole day. My mom would call me in for dinner, and I wouldn't want to come. We're not done yet, But it was getting dark, and I had to go home. But we were outside all day long. You don't see that anymore. So I
hey, Ronnie,
yeah.
I happen to agree with you very much about that. I've said, and I've spoken many times, I mean, I live across the street from ball fields that are empty, unless there's a practice or a game. And, as you mentioned, when we were kids, we were out playing all the time. Empty lots, we'd make our own, our own rules, all that kind of thing.
Right. We used to play.
Right, and today, if you look, I mean, the kids they're playing basketball, or they're playing football. Very few are playing baseball, And yet in the other countries of the world, in the Caribbean or in the Far East, they're playing baseball again. It's like a religion, and you can see the numbers of non-American players playing today in professional baseball.
Exactly. And I know Major League Baseball is concerned about this too, and they have started this program called RBI program,
right,
which is restoring baseball in the inner cities. And each major league team has one representative from that team that's like the spokesman for that. And I've worked very hard with RBI people here in Minnesota and other places. And I don't know. I still think Major League Baseball, and I think the teams in general have to back it a little further. They're not pushing it hard enough. And I think it's
Dave
so
Winfield
important.
take an active part in what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. Dave is a wonderful, wonderful man. His brother Steve is a very personal friend of mine. Dave is a great guy. We have a fellow up here called Frank White. I think we've had him on our show.
Right.
And he does a lot of this too. So there's a lot going on. But for me, it's not enough. It needs to be more.
Right.
And
as any activist will tell you, it's never enough.
Right.
Exactly. Okay, let me ask Gary and George what a typical you guys are old baseball talking buddies. You could wake up midnight, middle of December. You won't be swinging bats, but you'll be talking ball. What do you generally talk about? What do you have an ongoing topic that you go back to? How do you communicate, guys? Because you've been doing it effectively for a long time.
Gary, why don't you go ahead and talk about it, then I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, well, we talk, George and I talk a lot about the old Washington Senators back in the glory days of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And both George and I were members of the D.C. Baseball Historical Club, and we have a website, and we talk every day about the old Washington Senators, and we do a lot of communication on Facebook. But whenever baseball history is mentioned, I know George likes to chime in about a story about someone his dad knew or the career of a ball player from yesteryear, and I like to do the same as far as talk about old Washington Senators baseball history. So George and I keep
about
a lot of
barnstorming that players did back in those days with blacks and whites again playing against each other.
I wanted to mention that, Ralph, that you brought it up. Barnstorming, I'm not sure that it's ever done anymore, but barnstorming back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s was a major part of baseball. Matter of fact, Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth, after the 27 Yankees series, they went on a barnstorming tour that ran into some problems with Judge Landis, who didn't like him doing it, but it was called the Bustin' Babes versus the Larrikin Lou's. And they went around and they barnstormed and picked up, ball players in various cities, and the press came in, and it was, a wonderful way to spread the word about baseball and capitalizing on the fact that the 27 Yankees had such a wonderful season. Then later, and there's been a book about barnstorming, and it involves Satchel Paige and Dizzy Dean and Bob Feller, who went around and barnstormed in the 40s and late early 50s, and barnstorming today, I don't even know whether it's even done anymore, but it was a huge, very, very popular aspect of baseball that really spread the game in a lot of little towns and smaller cities where they might not have a major league ball team, but would be able to see these superstars come to their town.
And have them make a little extra bucks, because that was
right.
always an issue before unions came into play.
Right. Yeah, no, they did. They picked up some money, and that was part of the deal. But it was also, the money thing. Obviously, compared to what it is today, was very little. But the fact that the players were playing almost year round on barnstorming tours, and a lot of the ball players did it. And Gary, he mentions about the Washington club. I know that. There was quite a few teams that barnstormed and a lot of the Washington players. And the fact is that was just what players like to do. And in the off season, if they were working, and they all had to work, but sometimes if they had a chance to pick up some extra bucks, they were going to do it. And barnstorming was one of the ways they could do that.
Okay.
I have to tell you a story about barnstorming. A few years ago, I read an article. The Anderson Monarchs, when they were from Philadelphia, was a group of kids whose parents and coaches decided to give these kids an opportunity of a lifetime. And they rented a 1947 non-air conditioned bus from Philadelphia. They were headed west towards Kansas City for the All-Star game, when the All-Star game was there a few years ago. And these kids played baseball all along the way. The experience of barnstorming was exactly what they learned. So I heard about it from a friend of mine, gave me an article about this, and I wrote to the author of the article, and he got a hold of the coach of the Anderson Monarchs. And they happened to be in Kansas City when I was there for the All-Star game. So he called me and he said they were going to be at the Negro League Baseball Museum, and they wanted to meet me. However, they couldn't be there for my speech because they had a game in Columbia, Missouri. So when I come in early, I said, absolutely, you should have seen this bus. An old-time 1947 non-air conditioned bus. These kids were all dressed in uniforms. They were the greatest kids. I have pictures of it. And I got there at 9 o'clock in the morning. They were all waiting for me. I gave them the whole spiel about Jackie. And then Matt Kemp came in because, the All-Star game, they were all coming into the museum.
Right.
And then I got excited because he was a Dodger at the time. And I talked to Dave Stewart, who was his agent. And we had a great presentation with these kids. And I was so impressed with them. It was really, really great.
Did you get to meet Buck O'Neill at all, Ronnie?
I did.
Or any
several
of you
times.
guys, too.
I did.
Give me some
times.
Buck O'Neill impressions, stories, if you would.
Oh, I could sit and listen to him for hours. He had stories about people that were unbelievable. I mean, it was just crazy. Bob Kendrick, who is the president of the Negro Baseball League in Kansas City, is now he used to be his driver, and he'd take Buck all over driving him. And now Bob is relating these stories to others. I met him one time in St. Paul with Dave Winfield, and I could have sat there for 3-4 hours listening to him talk about Buck O'Neill and some of the things that happened and what it went on. He was telling a story about a catcher. I don't remember the guy's name, but he could throw a baseball over the center field wall. That's how strong his arm was. Over the center field wall from home plate.
This isn't Josh Gibson that you're talking to.
No, it was someone else. I don't remember his name. I had never heard it before. I mean, he was telling me about this other fella. I can't remember his name either. But he was so fast that they claimed that at night, when he turned off his bedroom lights, he could get back into bed before the light went off.
Cool Papa Bell.
Cool Papa Bell. That's who it was. And
right.
Stories like this, it was just wonderful. Just wonderful.
All right. Gary, what would you like? I've shortchanged you. We've had so many people in and out of here so much. Complete anything that you might have started that I cut you off over the weeks and months that you've been a guest. just make me feel better?
Well, actually, I've had my say, so I'm I'm content that you've given me my say. I mean, you haven't cut me off, so
Okay.
Everything good. But I like we were talking about the barnstorming. That had to be some interesting times, and you mentioned about the Negro League players versus the white players, and usually when they played, the Negro Leaguers won most of the time.
That's right.
I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. That book that I mentioned, it was called Satch, Dizzy, and Rapid Robert, written by Timothy Gay, who I believe was also a S.A.B.R member, but that's what it talked about. Many of the barnstorming games between the Negro League players and the Major League players, and the Negro League players did win more often than not. And Satchel Paige was one of the great stars, and he only was able to get to the major leagues at the tail end of his playing days. But during his prime, Satchel was one of the greatest, if not the greatest pitcher of all, and was able to hold his own and even do a lot better against the major league players than any of the major league pitchers could do.
And not only that,
did your dad barnstorm, George?
He didn't barnstorm as far as I know. I know that when he was a kid, youngster, that he played, and when he was in high school against some barnstorming teams, had Jimmy Fox and Lefty Grove and a lot of those great players. And he also, I remember him telling me a story. I think he barnstormed with the House of David one time and played against them. And anybody who's a baseball fan knows about the House of David. They used to barnstorm with full beards and were a strange-looking crew, but could really play. But I do remember my dad telling me about a game that he either played or attended or something about the House of David, which was, before my time. I really didn't know what the House of David was until I did some research later on. But barnstorming was very, very popular, and also, back then players did those kind of things because they wanted to play. Today, I think, when they get off the field, they're making so much money that they, don't maybe not even pick up a baseball for 3, 4, 5 months. And we also talked about that Arizona Fall League. I'm not sure that they have that anymore, but when my dad was coaching, there was a winter ball instructional league in Florida. And a lot of the teams would send their prospects and even foreign countries. My dad had been in Japan teaching baseball, and about 6 months later, the Japanese returned the favor by sending 4 or 5 of their players down to Florida to receive instruction from my dad. So the Florida Instructional League and a lot of the major league players, the young kids, were playing in that as well. And again, I don't know, maybe Gary knows if they still even have that. Maybe the Arizona Fall League has taken the place of the Florida Instructional League.
Yeah, I only know of Arizona as far as an instructional league in the fall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Casey Stengel invented that, as a matter of fact. And
did he?
one of his
Really?
Yes, he did. One of his proteges was a Washington senator, later on to play with the Washington Senators, Whitey Herzog, who incorporated that in the teams that he ran, where they'd bring in high prospects before spring training, and they'd, in Stengel's way, they teach them the Yankee way to do it, and get the coaches involved to look at these players, so they know what they had coming up the ranks, and they know what they could evaluate players as to what they can expect later on. And it was an excellent tool in keeping the dynasty going for all those many years under Casey. And yes, I think it is all but gone, and the Arizona Fall League has replaced that. Each team sends two or three of their best prospects, and teams are shared. Like maybe
right.
the Mets and Washington, and it wouldn't be the Mets and the Nationals. Maybe the Mets and the Angels, as an example, might send their prospects, each other's prospects, and they combine to make one team. So there you go. Hey, guys, we're running short on time. This is, as usual, very enjoyable for me. Talking ball with some insiders like you guys is a privilege for me. I appreciate it. Anything any of you want to add before we close it out?
I just wanted to thank Gary and George and you, Ralph. It's been terrific. It always is every week, and hopefully Chad will be back next week. I'm hoping.
Absolutely. Chad Rubin has been on our disabled list. He's recovering from some illness. Really want him back. Really want to talk about Minnesota Twins prospects, who they will be sending to the Arizona Fall League, and what's coming up in the future. It's been a great year for the Twins, no question about it.
Sure has. I mean, they won last night 17-0. They beat, unbelievable. They beat Kansas City 17-0.
Ronnie, they should save a few of those runs.
That's right. They sure could.
Old baseball adage, you got to play tomorrow. You shut out tomorrow.
My Dodgers have gone down the tubes all of a sudden.
Oh, I am so heartbroken, Ronnie.
They're so far ahead, Ronnie. Don't worry about it.
I know.
No, it's not a question.
But they lose a little bit. It's humbling. Baseball's a humbling game, both as a player and as a fan.
They lost a doubleheader yesterday. I mean, it's terrible. It's just crazy.
Ah, yes. As an old Giant fan, a little tear comes to my eye.
It breaks your... Yeah, I know.
And a tiny little violin. Hey,
I'm going to sign off, everybody. I got an appointment I got to run to, so I'm going to say goodbye to Gary and Ronnie and Ralph, and I'll talk to you guys again.
We're going to close it out.
Yep. Okay.
I'm going to thank you all for being here, and we'll be back next week, same time, as Alan Blumkin would say, same bat channel.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, George. Bye, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.